Limestone Cafe.
Merħba lura fil-programm Maltese DownUnder u fit-taqsima li jmiss Mark Avellino ser laqana ma' Eddie Micallef li għamel 16 sena bħala politikant fl-istat tal-Victoria u llum huwa chairperson tal-Kunsill tal-Komunitajiet Etniċi fil-Victoria.
Both my parents migrated to Australia, my father in the 1920s, the late 20s, and my mother in the late 30s, in 1938. We've got some photos of, it was in the Faces of Victoria exhibition. Some of those old photos of my father in the cane fields and my mother on the back of a motorbike in 1939, driven by her aunt. My father then left the cane fields, came to Melbourne and settled in Melbourne, where my mother came to Australia in 1938, late 1938. Wasn't intending to come to Australia, but the other sister, I think was Zania, was to come, and at the last minute a relationship, an engagement that had broken off was re-established and they swapped places. Because my mother looked, the sisters looked very, had a strikingly similar resemblance, so they were able to get away with it. And my mother came to Australia and we celebrated her birthday on the sister's birthday, and we were confused for many years. We didn't know which was the right birthday. And that was all sorted out some years later when they had an amnesty and were able to get her citizenship details.
Eddie, you know, with the work you do on the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria, and you're the chairperson currently, do you think that a lot of what drives you and what you do there is based upon what happened to you when you were younger? Or? Certainly did.
Most of my contemporaries at that time were Anglo or Anglo-Irish or so on, and you know, if you were treated badly, if they called you a wog or called you whatever, you know, go back to where you come from sort of stuff, which was pretty common back in the 1950s. I went on to become a shop steward in the Spencer Street Power Station. That's where my father actually got me the job there. I ended up representing over 1,000 workers there in my early 20s, and I ended up running campaigns against asbestos and the conditions that a lot of the workers, many Maltese in there, and later on many South Americans and many Italian Greeks, but I became the chair of the shop committee, which represented about 10 or 12 unions, so I was a spokesperson for all those unions at a very early age. So that then got me to be put in line for a union position, and I became in 1979 the first full-time occupational health and safety officer employed by a trade union in Australia. So I'm very proud of that, and then went on to do a lot of work with industrial noise, industrial chemicals, and of course asbestos and other hazards, and did a lot of pioneering work along with my counterpart in New South Wales, and then went on to do other things and ended up in the Parliament of Victoria, and I now represent the Maltese Community Council on the Ethnic Community Council of Victoria, and I become the fourth in line of Maltese chairs of the Ethnic Communities Council with Tony Bonici, Victor Borg, Maurice Kauke and myself. So in its 42 years, we've had four Maltese chairs, so I think that's something to be proud of.
That journey to sort of come all that way from being the son of immigrants to get into politics, and obviously the minute you're starting to, from an early age, deal just with the social justice within your own family, what do you think is the key kind of thing you've learnt over the years from being involved with all these different stratospheres of politics and social justice in Victoria?
The key thing I've learned is that everybody has a lot of potential in them, and they should be allowed to develop to that potential that they have. each according to their ability sort of approach.
At the time that you got into state parliament, what representation-wise of parliament would have been of ethnic background?
Very little, and very few, very few.
So the challenges must have been quite interesting for you at that period, I would suspect.
Well, when you get to be called an Afghan, a WOG, this is on the floor of Parliament.
Wow.
This is in the 1980s, and I've got some of those transcripts around where I was called a WOG, an Afghan, and somebody put a note in my box, "Hey Afghan, we're coming after you." This sort of stuff. This is in the 1980s. It's not
so that's like 30 years ago. Yeah.
The Parliament of the day did not reflect the diversity of the community. It does much more now.
So with your current work with the community councils, what do you think is the primary focus these days? You know, we live in a very diverse society. There's a lot of challenges happening as far as new immigrants go into the government's, federal government's kind of immigration policy. From your point of view, what's the biggest challenge we have now?
Creating social cohesion, getting the communities to work together. And we're moving away from multiculturalism to interculturalism, where the communities relate to each other and not being pigeonholed by this culture, that culture, separate cultures. We want intercultural activities where all the communities mix together and don't say that my culture is better than your culture sort of thing, and able to share that to develop and build a socially cohesive society. And I will say that the racism that's happening today reminds me of the 1950s and the early days when there was a lot of ignorance around. You would have thought we'd moved on from that, going through the golden years of multiculturalism with Grasby and the change, even with Malcolm Fraser. Malcolm Fraser, who was the patron, by the way, of the Ethnic Communities Council until he died. I mean, I thought we'd moved on from that, but the development of these right-wing rednecks, and aggressive, that are given leadership by the One Nation and those sort of politicians, political leaders, I think is rather a shameful situation. And it has the potential to do a lot of damage. I would like to see a more equality-based society where people work together, socially cohesive, have a lot of ability to go on and develop their potential.